Tonight we have John here. He's going to talk about how he uses a bandsaw to do magic, and Bob is going to introduce him.
Sorry I had to come back up here.
Sorry.
Yeah, I know that. You can all leave. No, let me tell you, John Jordann, part of the Smoky Mountain Woodturners, that's where I met him, and a number of the individuals in here joined him at the meetings. Well, to be perfectly honest, I asked him yesterday because everybody else turned us down. Well, maybe it was a couple months ago and he's been working on this for us.
And I thought you were somebody else.
No, but John, very, very skilled in his craft of wood turning, and also has done a number of videos on the bandsaw, and has some very nice little tricks to show us, but he also will show us the very basics on the bandsaw, and I think it's something everybody really needs to. If you don't know it, you need to know it, and if you do know it, you're going to learn more. So John?
Okay, does this sound okay? Oh, I hear an echo. Oh, maybe. Okay, this is a bandsaw. Oh, you knew that. I have to make some notes because
You're loud.
Turn it down on that? Yeah, it's too loud. Because I'm elderly and feeble-minded, so let's see, Tellico, yeah, this is the right place. I live near Clinton. We have a farm. We've got llamas and alpacas and horses and raise peacocks. How many peacocks do you need? Well, just let me know later. And we have guineas and chickens and honeybees and I forget what else. But I've been married to my lovely bride for 51 years now. She still puts up with me and lets me play in the shop. Built myself a new shop a few years ago. I don't know how qualified I am. I'm no bandsaw expert, but I've certainly used bandsaws quite a bit. And I've been doing woodworking more or less for about 50 years. And then wood turning for about 20 years. There is another John Jordann that's a wood turner. If you look up on the internet, you'll probably find him. People have sent me tools intended for him and all kinds of confusion, but no one sent me his money yet. But if you want to get a hold of me, I'll give you my email address and all that. The bandsaw, I know there are some wood turners in here, and maybe some wannabe wood turners who are interested, but to me the bandsaw and the lathe are the most important tools in my shop. This is an older bandsaw I don't use anymore. Attention, I'll raise this up. It's got a riser block on it. It's an old Delta. I've had it about 20-something years ago. But it will do an amazing job, even this saw here. The saw I use now is an 18-inch Rikon, which has more power and 220 volts and all that. But you can do some amazing things with this saw. I guess my goals for today is to, well, if anybody has questions, go like this. But my goals for today are to show how to set up the bandsaw, about safety, which is paramount importance, and some specific things about cutting thin versus thick woods. I also have a wood miser bandsaw behind the sawmill behind the barn, and cut trees down, trees that fall down at the farm. And I have a couple of metal cutting bandsaws too. They're all different, but they're all basically the same. And I teach bandsaw classes. Until the pandemic came along, I had 6 bandsaw classes in my shop for small groups of people. Anybody, have you been to one?
I've been to the shop, but not to the bank.
Okay, right. But the focus there is to how to take green logs and turn it into useful wood turning blanks. But the same process for turning into useful flat wood or any kind of woodworking applies there. So let me see. I was going to show you all my bandsaw secrets today. Well, maybe not all of them. You heard about the guy said, if I told you I had to kill you, I'd have to kill you. Well, I was at a ventriloquist convention one time. Don't you just love those 400 people walking around with puppets, saying rude things to each other, and they look through their puppets. And there was a guy named Jeff Dunham who was a ventriloquist, and he gave a little seminar on audience interaction, spontaneous interaction. And he said, don't do it. It always fails. He said, don't do it. And he said one time he was doing a magic show in, maybe he needed the Harry Potter one. He was doing a magic show in Vegas, and he did this magic trick, and some guy up in the balcony hollered down, how'd you do that? So he gave him the standard answer. Well, if I told you, I'd have to kill you. And there was a little pause, and the guy said, tell my wife! He said, sorry, it's not it. He said it was brought the house down, so the next night he hired a guy to sit in the bed. How did you do that? I thought that was hilarious. I do plan on doing more bandsaw classes, and I only have like 4 to 6 people at once. If there's anybody here that's interested in specifically in green wood on shop bandsaws turned into useful blanks and drying and the whole process, the class I usually allow 4 hours for. There's a lot to cover. And I made a video for the Wood Turning Club, and it's 45, 47 minutes long. And instead of cutting something on the bandsaw here tonight, we're going to talk about the bandsaw setting it up and everything, but I took that video and made it into 4 minutes. So as long as you got the 4-minute one, otherwise everybody's going to be asleep.
10 times speed.
Yeah, it's sped up through a lot of writing. Let's see, and if there's anything in particular somebody wants me to address on bandsaws in general or whatever, just like I said, just go like that. The biggest goal ever for me is safety. I mean, I like to do wood turning, make all kinds of things with it, and I like to work in the shop and all that, but it's hard to do wood turning without fingers. So I want to protect my fingers. Safety is the biggest thing. So I made a list, some safety things, distractions, like visitors there asking you questions or pets coming in. I lock the door whenever I work on the bandsaw. Stance. If you're pushing against something and you don't have a good balance or something, and you can kind of go into the blade, and that's all she wrote. Clutter around on the floor, slipping on something, that sort of thing. Avoid excessive force. If you've got excessive force, if something happens, you're going to have a problem. If you need excessive force, you've got a problem. There's something else wrong. Like whatever. Eye protection. Now the bandsaw doesn't throw, wood at you like a table saw can, and some other saws, but still, it can throw dust and splinters. If I'm working on something that's splintery, I'll always wear good eye protection, and something that makes dust, I'll always wear a respirator. On my bandsaw that I use, I have a big cyclone, 5 horsepower Clearview cyclone in it, pulls dust from 3 different places, and it's amazing. But I still wear the respirator when I'm doing something that's very dusty. I've known 2 people that have had to quit woodworking completely because they became sensitized to wood. I have a mantra when I'm sawing on the bandsaw. We'll talk about wood sticks in a minute, and say, where would my hands go if the wood suddenly disappeared? That means if I've got a block of wood, say I'm cutting this block of wood like this, and I've got my thumb back behind here, I've got it up against the fence and everything, and if the wood should split or run into a soft spot and push through a pithy spot or some kind of problem, and my finger's in the way, there's my finger going to go right into the blade. Every time I make a cut on the bandsaw, I tell myself, where would my hands go if the wood suddenly disappeared? Make sure my hands are out of the way. When I'm using small stuff, I'll often use push sticks, and I make push sticks a little bit funny. It looks like a two-finger on the end of it, a little flat. And with that, on a little piece of wood, I didn't bring any, but I can push down with the finger and then push with the little notch on it. So I'll use, if I'm cutting something small against the fence, I'll use two of them like this and go through there. So that's a thing on safety that I think is very important. I've known and heard stories about people. Does anybody go to these woodworking forums, the Wood Central? Anybody go to Wood Central or Saga Creek?
Yeah, I've been on one Saga Creek.
Okay, I'm a moderator there, mostly in the wood turning area. But there are stories there where people have cut their thumb off in various things, and which it's nice for people to tell the stories that makes everybody sit up and say, oh, I don't want to do that. So, safety is the most important thing. Okay, some very, very dangerous cuts. One is, the biggest one is the unsupported cut. This block right here is angled like this, and if I were to push it into the saw like this, can you see that from the, is there a better angle? If I were to push it into the blades going down, it's not supported all the way down to the table, and it can pull the wood down and suddenly go out of control, and you can have a big problem. You can hurt your hand. You can really mess up. Something that's round, like this log, you do not want to cut. Now, it might make sense if you used bandsaws before, but if you've never used a bandsaw much and you think, oh yeah, I can cut through that, I can hold on to that, you're not going to hold on to it unless you're real lucky. It's going to twist on you. It'll pinch your fingers. It might bend the blade. It might bend the bandsaw up. It might break things. It might ruin your day. There are some things you can do. You can make, I make these little various sizes of wedges and things. You can make wedges, like if I were needed to cut this in half like that, I would put like two on this side and one on this side and move them around, and that's a safe way to cut. There's some other ways too, but we don't have time. Timekeeper, we doing okay? All right. So don't cut round things sideways on the bandsaw. Even pieces of dowel like this, it can catch and spin and hurt you. There is one easy way to take care of that. Just use one of these little fancy clamps and put it down, and now you've got support. You can push that thing through and cut it. And another way is to make V-blocks. Make a couple of V-blocks and you can hold it and you can get away with that without getting hurt real bad. Okay, let's see. Instability. Say, if I wanted to cut this thing right through here, and it's rocks, so it may start cutting here, it may be fine, it gets over to the middle, and it pulls it down, it puts the blade in a pinch, it will pull it sideways, and it can give you the same problem. Everything can go south in a nanosecond. So something that's unstable, you can use wedges and things to hold it and push it through. Done that hundreds of times like that. Okay. Something I call a suddenly unsupported cut. I'll use this as an example. It's got a big crack in it. Say I'm cutting along through here, and this is dogwood, and it's hard anyway, so I'm putting some pressure on it. My blade's not quite as sharp, and I'm putting some pressure on it, and suddenly it breaks. And now the part of it might break away and make it unsupported all the way down to the table, and it can twist on me. And I had that happen one time. I was cutting a nice piece, had a nice flat on it, and I had a rotten spot going through it at an angle, and that broke away and twisted it. It was on this bandsaw too, and it bent the blade and pinched my finger, but I didn't lose any blood, which was nice. Okay, let's see, so unsupported, the building on table. Oh, if you have a helper, and if you got something long, I've got long stuff through here. Resawed some long things. The helper, don't let them guide and pull. All they have to do is support, but otherwise you can get into trouble. We'll talk about resawing with a 12-inch cut. Well, you can resaw, and very useful piece. Here's some examples I brought. A little piece of walnut and holly, it's Osage orange. It's hard to find veneer in some of these species. And it's real easy to resaw. And I didn't have this saw for too long when a friend came over and he brought a board he wanted me to resaw. It was 2 by 12, 12 foot long, Douglas fir. I said, okay, I didn't know any better. So I had resawed a few small things, so I made a tall fence, and I got up and opened the garage door on the other side, and I got way back here and started to resaw, and right along the fence, we successfully sawed that into 4 pieces, and enough where when I ran them through the planer, skip planed them, why it made enough. He needed to close in some beams. But that's something I wouldn't even want to try today. But it's possible. It's real easy to cut thin stuff. I call this is one of my blanks that I use to make these little small squarish platters. It's real easy to cut thin stuff on the bandsaw, and it's harder to cut thicker stuff. So I'm going to talk first about setting up the bandsaw with the intention of cutting the harder stuff. So, let me see. How are we doing on time? Okay. Okay, saw alignment. You want the cut to be square with the table, and you want it to be parallel with the miter gauge slot if possible, and you certainly want it to be, where I put the fence, you want it to be cut to be parallel with the fence. And if you get some drift, you can fix it. To check for drift, you take a board, like a piece of plywood or a piece of 4/4 or something, and draw a line on it and start running it through and go till you're about halfway through, follow the line, and then stop, and then you see what kind of angle the board is to the table, and you can fix that. But before you even attempt to fix it, you need to make sure something about the wheels. Now, what I did with this saw was terrible when I got it, and I worked on it, and I read a number of books and did some research and read the controversy about coplanar wheels versus not coplanar. Some people whose name has the word "snot" in it will say you don't need to do that sort of thing, but that did wonders for me to fix up this bandsaw. One thing is, I want my blade to run exactly in the middle of this tire. The tire is on this, some saws are flat tires, this has a crown on it. And I want it to run in the middle, on the top and the bottom. Now if it's not in the middle, if it's out toward this end, you got this big crown, and then your blade, if it sits right in the middle, your blade is straight like this. But if the blade is running on the back side, the blade might be tilted out, away from the center of the tire, and then the same way on this side. And if you go out on one side on this wheel and the other side on this wheel, you can have a twist in your blade. And what's that going to do to your cut when you're cutting on something big? It's not necessarily good. So you can solve all those problems by making the wheels coplanar. And that means if you had a straight edge that could go from here all the way down, it would touch all 4 points with the blade on it under tension. If it's not under tension, you can't really tell. So you want it to go, and to fix that on this saw, I had to take this wheel off and put a couple little shims underneath it. Now to fix it on my Rikon, the Rikon has an adjustment down here on the bottom wheel. It has 4 bolts and nuts, and you just loosen them and until you get the wheel so it's lined up just right. It works like a charm. So that's the first thing that I want to make sure is my blade is running right smack in the middle of the wheel. Question?
Is it the blade in the center of the wheel or the teeth in the center of the wheel?
The whole blade.
Not the teeth.
Not the teeth. That teeth will be out in front of the crown.
Yeah.
Because if that's what I've read in some books that authors that I trusted, and that's what I've convinced myself. There are other ways that people think, and that's fine, but that's the way I'm going to do it. So I just tell you the way I'm going to do it. But if you have the teeth in on the center of the blade, that means the blade itself can go back on that little curve. Yeah.
So you're saying the gullet is on the crown, the gullet of the blade.
Well, it depends on how wide your blade is.
Okay.
If you had a 1-inch blade, the gullet would be way out in front of the center of the crown. If you had a 1/4-inch blade, it would be, right there in the middle. So, and that's another good point. Let's see, where's my check for grid? Oh, if you have sawn your piece of wood and you found out after it's lined up, you find out that you need to correct for drift. Most bandsaws will let you loosen these 4 bolts under the trunnion and rotate the table a little bit and tighten it back up. There's a little bit of play in the bolts. To have where did that put my chair?
Your pen?
Chair. No, the miter. Oh, I see it. I see it. I'm sorry, I've got ADDHHHD. Does anybody know John Lucas? Some people I know. I was at his place one time, and I do a little astronomy. I had my telescope set up, and I was running back and forth. One of his friends was there, and I said, sorry, I've got ADDHHHD. He said, no, you don't. He said, you got ADOS. I said, what? He said, it's attention deficit. Ooh, shiny. Yeah. Get sidetracked by something and get way off track. So you can use that. That's for free. So you want to get the table, if possible, lined up with this slot. But that's not as important as having the fence lined up with it. You can be off a little bit here, and then you can still make most of your cuts that you want like this. But I still want to get it lined up this way, and then lined up this way. And all of these fences, the 2 bolts on this one, if it's not lined up, you would take your angle that you got out of that and set it right on this side, loosen these 2 bolts, and this whole fence will go back and forth until you get it just where you want it and you can lock it down.
Do you normally have to set the drip for every blade, or is it you set it once for the machine and it's good?
I just said it once and it's good, but I use the same width blade all the time. That's a good question. I use a 1/2-inch blade for almost everything. Most of my sawing is green wood to dry, make turning blanks, so I can make stuff like this to dry and all that. And a 1/2-inch blade is perfect for that. And I can cut pretty good radius on it and all that. These saws, if you look back here in this little gauge, it says, oh, you can put a 3/4 inch blade on here. The manufacturer says 3/4. You can't put a 3/4 inch blade on this saw and tension it right and make it work right. In fact, if you do, and I tried doing that, on the stock saw, it will bend some parts up in here that have to be replaced, and you'll need a stronger spring. The best advice I've read is if you're going to use this little scale on the back, and it's not recommended, but if you have to, if you've got a 1/2-inch blade, put it on the 3/4 inch mark, the tension. If you've got a 1/4 inch blade, put it on the next one up, half inch or 3/8 or whatever, move it up. On my Rycon bandsaw, on this 1/2-inch blade, when I tension it properly, the gauge tells me I'm almost at a 1-inch blade size. That's what it needs. I'll talk about that in a minute. How do you find it out? Now, Mr. YouTube guy, whose name has the word grass in it, has all these different methods of setting the tension. You know, your flutter method, and you're pressing on it, and methods like that. But those won't work unless you have experience with them already. But we'll talk about that in just a second. Okay. After the blade is right and the table is right, also want to make sure the blade is square to the table by adjusting it, and a lot of tables underneath will have a stop. This one has a little stop over there that once you get it pushed all the way over, once you get it real square, push it all the way over, it'll come back to the same spot. On my saw, I tighten it up. I never tilt the saw blade. There's some reasons to do that. If I need to cut something tilted, I make a wedge and I put it on and cut it with a wedge like that. It's not really important to have it square this way. It might be okay, but it's not nearly as important because of the way that we make our cuts. Okay, let's see. The guides. Every bandsaw has 3 guides on top and on bottom. Now this one has guide blocks, and then it has a thrust bearing in the back. And the thrust bearing, turn that around a little bit. Can you see? Probably not. This thrust bearing sits like this, and the blade runs into it. And it's real important to keep these things clean so they'll turn. If you never look at them, they can get gummed up with sawdust and that, and then you'll eat holes. You'll wear holes and things in the side. That could need to be turned around some more, couldn't it? Yeah. Then it'll mess up the bearing, it'll mess up your blade, and it'll do all sorts of things. So it's nice to keep those things clean. If they don't turn nice, why replace it or clean them. This type of guide, these blocks, are meant to push in to the blade and almost touch it. The other type of bearings on the larger saws will have bearings that run this way on the guides, that spin like this, and they have to be adjusted so they're right behind the gullet, and you want them to come up close to the blade but not touch it. You should be able to spin the wheel and never have that blade touch that bearing. If it touches it, it's spinning it all the time. Yes?
How close should the back bearing be to the blade?
the back bearing,
The circuit.
the thrust bearing.
Okay.
It would, I don't know if there's a spec on that or not. I put it back far enough so when I spin it by hand, it doesn't touch. And then if I spin it, when I turn it on, it still doesn't touch. But as soon as you start pushing wood through, it's going to touch and it's going to spin. That's its job. But when there's no pressure on it at all, it shouldn't touch. These bearings that are on the side, the guide blocks or the other bearings, some people say use a piece of paper like a dollar bill and put it a dollar bill's thickness between the bearing and the side. If you give it too much, the blade can get floppy as it's cutting. If it's too tight, it's going to run the bearing all the time. So I keep a $2 bill hanging next to my saw just in case. The bottom guides are often neglected because they're hidden and they get covered up with sawdust and the guides can go bad and you never even look at them. So you need to pay special attention to the bottom guides and clean them out occasionally. I put magnets and keep whatever tools I need to work on these. Anything I need to do with the guides, right handy with all the time right here next to the bandsaw. When you're cutting, you want to keep, of course, you want to keep the top guide as low as you can and still see and make your cut. It gives it more support that way. I want to talk about tension for a minute. If you're cutting thin stuff like this, you can get away with a whole lot of slop on the tension and still make a decent cut. You know, you can cut plywood or 4/4 or even, I call anything under 6 inches thin. So you can get away with a lot of leeway on your tension. But when you're cutting thicker stuff, like this piece of spalded maple, isn't that pretty? Which came from a block about 16-inch round, and I cut it up on the bandsaw as a round that was less than 12 inches high, so it fit. But when you start cutting a thicker piece on it, if your tension's not right, it can give you all kinds of problems. You can be cutting along. Before I learned all about tension and how to get it right, I even had, let me get this up a little bit. That was stiff. I haven't used this saw for about 8 years. Okay, let's pretend. Let's pretend it's going through. But I had the saw blade going through and I was cutting a little thin sliver off of it and holding it like this, and the blade came out the side of the wood. It bowed like this and then went back in. That's not enough tension. What can contribute to that is if the blade is not sharp, or especially if it's not sharp on one side, it can be guided that way. So proper tension is real important if you're going to cut thick stuff. And all these methods of doing tension like this, pressing on it with your finger and saying, okay, a 1/4 inch deflection for what size of blade, for what thickness of blade, there's too many variables here. The only way I believe in doing it is with a tension gauge. So I bought myself a Starrett tension gauge, and it turns out to measure the tension in pounds per square inch, you're actually just measuring the amount of movement, the stretching of the metal. It doesn't matter how thick the blade is or how wide it is or anything. with the Young's modulus and the equations, is you're just measuring how much the blade stretches, and that relates precisely to pounds per square inch of steel. So I bought this Starrett gauge, and I use it when I have a new type of blade on it. It's real simple to use. Tighten it up, loosen the tension first and tighten it up, and then you start tensioning the blade, and then you watch the needle till it goes up to the number that you want. Usually tension to 15,000 psi. Now, these are expensive. You buy a Starrett, this is $300 or $400 now. But there's a guy that sells Itura Design. He sells them for a lot cheaper. He makes them and they're just as good. It might be, if you have a lot of bandsaw users, it might be good if you had a club that wasn't broke, is to maybe buy one for the club and let different people use it. I've gone to people's houses and adjusted their tension. And once I set the tension on my saw wire, I will make a little mark and a note as to what it is for these blades, like this. Okay, so let's see, talk about blades. We do it okay on time?
Yep.
All right. Oh, make sure your blade is sharp, really sharp. And how do you tell if it's sharp? I mean, you can tell if you're pushing wood through, but maybe you push hardwood through one day and softer wood through the other day. And if you're running your thumb up, it feels sharp to me. But what I found out is if I run my fingernail or my thumbnail up, if the blade is starting to get dull, it'll kind of slide up those teeth. And if it doesn't, it'll catch on just like a knife blade. You know, you test the knife blade on your thumbnail, so you can tell the blade's good and sharp like that. You want it to be sharp, so you don't have to use too much more pressure than you need, and you want a better cut, especially with thicker stuff, especially when resawing. Something I do is sharpen the blades. I get my blades made down at Holston Gas in Knoxville. They have a blade shop there, and they'll make any size of blade, anything that you want. If they didn't have the stock, sometimes I'd have to order a roll of 100 feet or whatever, and then they'd make a bunch of blades. And I buy the blades by 8 or 10 at a time and keep them hanging up there. And I change them often, but I still sharpen them at least once or twice or 3 times before I go to another blade. Because when I'm cutting wood and making blanks, I'm sometimes making way too many blanks. But you might need some more. And some people ask about sharpening, and there's different ways to do it. So I just brought this, and I just give you the 8-second spiel on sharpening. I make a mark, I get this, I knock my fence down, I get the angle. This is a Dremel with a little metal cutting disc, real thin disc. I put the angle so it's just right for that angle, and I touch the tooth, and I go zit, 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 and it doesn't take very long at all. My right one has 440 teeth or something like that, and it doesn't take me very long at all for 3 teeth per inch blade. Now, if it were 6, 10, no, I wouldn't do it. But I've sharpened them many like this. Now, the teeth are alternate, left, right, center, and I've tried it both ways. Left, right, center, and then straight on. I can't tell the difference in the cut. But it's amazing after you find out you're having a little trouble and it's so sharp, it's amazing. It's just like a brand new blade. Now you will decrease the kerf a little bit every time because the teeth that are angled out, you're cutting a little bit off of them, so it'll get a little bit narrower. And if you're not real careful, you might leave a couple of long teeth there, so your cut might not be as smooth. You might not want for some fancy veneer, but it's fine for cutting up blanks for wood cutting. Okay. So, one more thing about blades. I almost always get asked, how do you when you get blades, they're usually folded up. How do you fold them up? And some people have trouble folding them up. And there's a real simple way. Does everybody know how to do this? Or
Do it.
you want me to do it?
Yeah.
Okay. Now now some people do it in the air like this. And I can't do that gracefully. So I don't do it like that. I'll show you the easy way. How about this? This is a good spot. Put it on the floor and put your foot on it, and your hands will grip this, and your hands will make this kind of motion. They'll push in, and then they'll come together. And just like that. Now, in slower motion, as I'm making my hands come in, oh, by the way, if you have a blade with big teeth on it, you haven't done it before, you might want to wear gloves. Now, I've got my bandsaw mill, 1.25 inches, less than 1 inch per 1 tooth per inch. It scared me. So I uncoil it by taking it out in the grass and I throw it. And then I coil it up with gloves and safety glasses on it. But for small blades like this, okay, I usually don't have that any problem, but as you're making the first bend hands toward each other, this top piece is making a loop that's going towards your belly. So it goes right towards your belly. And now you don't want to push it together like this, you want to twist it together. Turn your hands like this. And now you're making those loops and you just fold them up like this. And you get your 3 loops. Try it a few times. It's actually pretty silly. Oh, should I do that here? And then you also can do this if you want to. You get 3 loops if you do it once, and if you do it again, this one I can't really hear. You do it again, you can get 5 loops out of it, which makes it a little more compact if you have a number to store. And one time, just to be a smart aleck, I made 7 loops, just for bragging rights. It wasn't easy. So anyway, that's how to that's how to do that. Okay, when cutting thick wood, I always use a 1/2 inch blade, 3 teeth per inch. And like I said, I get them at Holtz at their bandsaw shop. The guy comes in at 3 in the morning, so if you want to talk to him, talk to him early in the morning because he goes home. Sometimes he'll make blades while you wait. If he's got time. Yes, sir.
Can we go back to tension for just a second? You leave your saw blades tensioned, or do you take them and you untension the saw when you use it?
That's almost like a political debate between those who tension and untension. The manufacturers always say to detension.
Right.
You need all the manufacturers. A lot of people say, I haven't taken the tension off my saw for 10 years, and it's fine. They use the same blade for 10 years. Not too much sawing, but it might depend somewhat on the blade and what kind of tires you got, and if you can degrade things like that. This is a quick tensioner arm I bought at Woodcraft one day when it was sat on a table, and for months nobody bought it, and it's been great because I can move it down to here, to this spot, and it makes it, really releases the tension. If I move it down here, it releases it more so you can change the blades. So I like to detension because it's easy. On my Rikon bandsaw, the bigger bandsaw has a tension lever that I detension. Now I sort of leave the tension on if I know I'm going to be using the bandsaw again tomorrow, the next day, or a few days. But if I'm going on vacation, or if I know I'm going to be busy with the farm for the next 2 weeks, I'll detension it. And something that you don't ever want to do is turn on the saw with it detension. Because it can make a mess. And there's a trick that I learned. It's not an original. Make a little board and write the word tension on it. Did I get it?
Got it.
Yeah. Write the word tension on it and then slide it right here when you detension it. Then when you come back later, you don't have to think about, oh, yeah, I need to tension my blade. So that's I thought that was a great little tip. So the answer is I don't know. Let's see. I've got a couple other little bitty tips here I wanted to, which have saved me a lot of hassle. I use magnets for everything because they're always looking for a pencil or a Sharpie or something. And I use soft wire, just what they used to call baling wire, which is just a soft iron wire. Make a few loops around it and stick things that otherwise won't stick up there. And I keep various calipers and my other size larger on the back. I have scissors and I have Carl Castle from Wait, Don't Tell Me doll up there and a few other things. But I use magnets for everything. When cutting curves, part of this is safety and part of it is easy, makes it easier. This curve right here is not a real sharp curve, the same way with a bowl. You typically might think to stand here and make the curve. What works a whole lot better, for me anyway, is to stand here on the side and then you can twist the thing like this. Easier, and your hands are way out of the way. It's easier to see too. One thing I didn't mention, I have 3 lights on my bandsaw. A real powerful LED, a light on this side and a light on this side. I'm off on this side. So I get light all the way around. The worst light in the world is this overhead diffuse lights as far as seeing detail in that. So I get bright lights, make good marks, and make my cuts from the side like that. These, by the way, I cut and then use it on disc sander on the side, and then to make it nice and flat, I run through the drum sander as well. Same thing with veneer and that. And I meant to behave. It's like my kids. No, I meant to. I brought these, mentioned, well, why does a wood turner need veneer? This is a little cup that I made, walnut, basswood, cherry, walnut, basswood, walnut. So these pieces of walnut are some veneer that I cut a little bit thicker than your normal veneer that you would buy. And then, because this is end grain to end grain, and you go side grain, end grain to side grain, and then to end grain, you get a whole lot. Anybody know Frank Penta? You know Frank Penta? This is one of his blanks that he gave me. And you can see it's got lots and lots of pieces. It makes wide use of his bandsaws and sanders and all that to make. And when I make beads of courage boxes, turned beads of courage boxes, sometimes I'll put thick layers of pieces, maybe this thick and then a 1/4 inch, and just to make different patterns on the side. So it's a good reason for a wood turner to use to make veneer. Okay. Oh, one thing about cleaning the blade. If you work with green wood and it's got sap in it, sometimes the sides of your blades will get gummed up. And this might look dangerous, but it's not. This is a brass piece of square brass tubing, and it used to be this long, and I've got it where it hangs on the saw, and I'll stand back and I'll turn the saw on, and I hold it on the side, and run it back and forth, and that brass will rip all that gummy stuff off the side and clean that blade off. it does an amazing job. And since it's brass, if you run into the teeth, it doesn't hurt anything to take a little bit off the end. So anyway, cleaning the blade. This is part of my tips. Any more tips? No. Magnets cutting curves. Tension reminder, keep the bearings clean, cleaning the blade, and sharpening the blade. Okay, I'm not going to make any cuts here because it'd make a big mess, and then they'd make me sweep it up. So I took the video, and I was telling you about my bandsaw class. I allow about 4 hours. If you're cutting green wood into turning blanks and cutting them and waxing and drying and the whole sequence, there's a lot to it. There's a whole lot to it. So it takes a long time. So I made a video for the club, for the wood turning club, and it was the smallest I could get. It was 47 minutes. So I took that video, and I hope you didn't get the 47-minute one. You got the 4-minute one. and I cut a whole bunch of stuff out of it. It just basically shows some cutting, and you can see some of the push sticks and some of the different stances and things like that. But I sped it up with my magic video editing. This focus, remember, is on making turning blanks, but the same principles apply for everything else. Okay, so I hope 4 minutes isn't too long to put anybody to sleep. I'm going to watch you. Can you crank the sound? Yeah. That's my farm. And there's the shop I built. I built it with my bare hands. No, I use tools. One of my lathes.
Hello, welcome to my shop. Today I want to show you how I turn log sections like this into turning blanks like this. Lots of different sizes, lots of different shapes. Really doesn't take much effort at all. I use an ordinary shop bandsaw and no extra attachments. I turn lots of different things, mostly from drywood. You know, sometimes things are best turned from drywood. Things like lidded boxes, thin spindles like the wands, utility turnings, lots of utility turnings like pepper mills, rolling pins. It is so handy when I want to go turn something, just grab a piece off the shelf. I use 2 basic methods to cut up logs on the bandsaw. One is standing the log on end. The other is ripping down the center. If the height is 12 inches or less, or 12-inch cut bandsaw, of course, then I almost always use the standing because it's more stable and it's really easy to cut.
I always watch where the fingers go.
I thought you were going to speed this up.
Little anchor seal. I like to put my anchor seal in a container and leave it open for a few days, and it gets thicker. It goes on thicker and it works better.
Let's take a look at the rip method. Remember, it's for log sections that are longer than 12 inches. This is about 15 inches. But still less than 12 inches in diameter.
And there's a whole lot more about this, about how to make them stable on the table and various things that you could do that I had to leave out here. But we do cover that in the bandsaw class. I've cut log sections about 3 foot long this way. Push them halfway through and then go around the other side and pull the rest of the way through. I write the date and the species on every piece.
Just a word about drying. I've cut and dried hundreds and hundreds of blanks and had very few failures. The more you know about wood structure, how it moves, how it shrinks, the better. I've been processing and drying blanks for about 15 years now, and I'm starting to run out of room. If you process a few blanks occasionally, and before long, you'll have an abundance. So many to choose from. Stay safe now.
I've got all those blanks, but I also have I like to acquire wood in 8/4, 12/4, and sometimes 16/4 in the planks and that, and then I can cut platters and bowls or cut them up into long sections and things like that. I do have some recommendations for books. If you're interested, this is my favorite. This is my favorite bandsaw book by Mark Daginski. This is his second version, New Complete Guide to Bandsaws, and he covers everything about alignment and how, using the bandsaw. He even talks about cutting green logs and how to find wood and things like that. It's absolutely the best one, and I'm a book maniac. I buy every book I can find. You're talking about making toys for kids. I got a stack of toy books like this. But anyway, this is the one that I would really recommend getting if you just have one book on bandsaws. This one is a catalog from Itura Design. It's almost a course in bandsaws, and he's got a chock full of tools and things. Real nice guy to call up and talk to too. He'll answer questions. He'll sell parts for these 14-inch bandsaws mostly, and some other bandsaws, but just an excellent resource to have. And his catalog has always been free. I don't know what it is now. For those interested in wood in general, now when I cut blanks to dry, let me throw my books on the floor. I cut blanks to dry like this, and this might take 10 years to dry, and I monitor the drying by weighing it and marking on it. I cut that on a bandsaw. That was 24 inches in diameter for cut it on my bandsaw. So I like to weight and the date, and then I know when it quits changing, it's dry. But there's more to it than just drying it, because you kind of need to know how the wood shrinks and when it comes out of the tree, and most of you know this anyway, how it shrinks more, the TR ratio, shrinks more along the rings than it does in the radial direction. So depending on how the blanks are set, or your pieces like this, see, this one's got a little warp in it, you can make a lot of difference by understanding what's going on, of how you apply your wax to let it dry, and how you make your cut in the first place. And the book that I really recommended, I love it so much, I keep one underfoot at all times, is R. Bruce Hoadley, Understanding Wood. This guy is amazing. He's not only a wood technologist, he's a craftsman too. So he's a carver, and he turns and things like that. So he's not good. You get some books on the technology of wood, and they're real hard to understand from the science perspective, and you can get what you want out of it, but it takes a little effort. This guy makes it easy. He also has a good introduction to identifying wood, and that's become a hobby of mine. He's got a separate book called Identifying Wood. Use a microscope or a lens and shave off the end grain, look at the porosity, look at the rings, look at the structural porosity, the parenchyma, and some other things, and you can get a real good handle on what wood is which. I started on that when I was at the wood turning club, and somebody passed around a show and tell thing, and on the bottom I turned over and said cherry. But it was ring porous wood. It was cherry. Cherry is diffuse porous, and you can see that with your eyes. You didn't even need a magnifier. So, or you can forget about it, just write anything on it like he did. But this guy even has a real nice section on how to find wood. I think this book is worth buying. I teach bandsaw classes, like I said, in groups, and I also teach wood turning one at a time. This is the first time I've been at doing a demonstration or a talk at a non-wood turning place. Wow, I feel really honored. So far I've done wood turning demos in 5 different states, a bunch of different clubs around, and that's what I really enjoy, showing people how to make things like this. Or my specialty is long, thin spindles, which are hard to make. But I've had a lot of fun here tonight. I hope that I didn't see anybody fall asleep. You guys stay awake. So how are we on time? Are we done?
You're fine.
Okay, so that's about all I have, except for any questions or any clarifications, or anybody wants to buy some peacocks, or if I need some money, I'll pass my wallet around. Yes.
On the wheels, urethane versus regular rubber wheels, any comments about?
I like the urethane because to me it lasted longer. I put it on the original wheels on my Raycon bandsaw started to disintegrate after a certain point. So I bought the Sulphur Grove urethane wheels, and they've been wonderful. The only tip there is that don't buy them from Sulphur Grove. They charge more than if you buy them from Amazon. The same thing from Amazon. So if anybody is interested in wood turning and getting started in wood turning, one of my favorite things to do is to teach beginners in wood turning. And I have a method that I start with a skew, which is the most evil and hated tool, and a rank beginner who has never touched a lathe before. I have never had one get a catch. We start with a skew, and after just a little while they are making planing cuts with it, and they tell me later, this is my favorite tool. So I've got a way to teach that. If anybody's interested in that, why, let me know. Unfortunately, it would probably have to be underneath the Smoky Mountain wood turners, because they have insurance that will protect the person and myself and the whole thing from that. So if you're interested in wood turning and getting started, you can't do much more better than to join the wood turning club too. So you get lots of demos every month. And,
So John, where are you located?
I'm just north of Clinton, right outside of Clinton. It's takes me about 30 some miles to drive to the woodcraft store. It's about 30 miles. It took me, Google said, an hour and 1 minute to this place without rainstorms. Yeah, so it was slowed down. We have 27-acre farm out there, and just good, clean fun. So, and if anybody's interested in the bandsaw class, when those start up again, why, there's a little bit of a waiting list, but let me know about that too. And I did not make a slide or something with my address or, my email or phone number on, but I can write it on a piece of paper if anybody's interested.
We'll get it put into the newsletter.
Okay, okay. Yeah, put my bank accounts in there too, so people.
So we can draw out.
No. Oh, yeah, that worked both ways. Well, I hope this wasn't too boring for you. I had a good time. Thank you.
Not only was that entertaining, but very, very informative. We really appreciate your coming. A little memento of your coming today. And sorry you couldn't join us for dinner.
I'm gonna cry!
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
By the way, Jack, he said he charges $1,200 for this. Just thought I'd let you know.
Okay, I'm gonna turn this thing off, so if I say anything else, I just have to holler. So, if anybody's interested in any of this, to ask questions or whatever, why, I'll be here for a little while packing up.
Okay, well, thank you very much.